Hello, everyone. I'm Dalton,
And I'm Clinton.
and this is the LA Do Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the LA Do Podcast, where we talk about anything from movies to video games to comics and everything in between. On today's episode, we're discussing the Phase 2 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, so the Phase 2 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, consists of Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America Winter Soldier, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man, and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Now, before we get into our list, which, coincidentally, is just about as similar as we did in the first episode, but a few minor changes.
Yeah.
Especially for you. Before we get into it, I do want to thank our friends at the Confirmed Epic Podcast for helping clarify some things on the last episode, mostly regarding the newer comic book Hulk Amadeus Cho, and for helping clarify the name of the Incredible Hulk teased villain for a possible sequel that never happened, The Leader. Now, Phase 2 picks up where Phase 1 left off. Following the first Avengers movie, like you said, it goes right into Iron Man 3, a year after Phase 1 ended with the Avengers. So 2013, there were two films. It was Iron Man 3 and Thor the Dark World. The following year, it continued with Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain America the Winter Soldier, and then concluded in 2015 with Age of Ultron and Ant-Man. So in total, just like Phase 1, 6 films, spanning from 2013 to 2015. Almost a 2-year, probably right at 2 years, by the time the films came out, of Marvel films. And they dominated the film landscape at that point. There was no real any DC movies coming out. Man of Steel came out in 2013, I do believe.
2012, 2013, one or the other.
But it didn't pick up. DC movies didn't pick up until around 2016 with Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
And then after it followed, with Wonder Woman and the Justice League. And then Suicide Squad before that, unfortunately. But here's hoping for the Suicide Squad, James Gunn directing. But let's go ahead and get into our list and talk about our number 6.
All right, so our number 6 is Thor the Dark World. It is, in my opinion, and I believe in your opinion as well, it's the least favorite Thor movie so far. Yeah. It's definitely not as good as the original, even though the original wasn't perfect.
I still prefer the original over this one.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And Ragnarok. I wouldn't be sure, really, but I'd have to rewatch them all. But definitely, this is my least favorite Thor movie. In your opinion, do you think this would be worse, in your opinion, as Incredible Hulk?
Incredible Hulk's worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the honest statement, because it had a bland story. It was... I'm not going to say it was exactly like the 2003 Hulk.
Yeah.
Because it's not. It's definitely not. It's a lot different. But it was just not entertaining, because the way that Edward Norton, who originally played the Hulk before Mark Ruffalo did in the Avengers and thereafter, he had so much creative control, or not creative, he wanted creative control, but he had so many creative differences with, well, it wasn't Marvel Studios then, but Marvel head and creators on the film, and they just butted heads so much, and with the director, it didn't turn out the way he wanted, so it was kind of a jumbled mess almost between the director and Edward Norton. And Edward Norton's a good actor. He's a great actor. But it's just with this, it was not strong because he didn't have as much influence on the character as he wanted, and it was all a jumbled mess. Especially, it was almost like with in Iron Man, the original actor that played Rhodey, how everything transpired there with money being cut for the second film, so he didn't want to join back. And then it automatically, or not automatically, but it went on to be Don Cheadle portraying War Machine in Iron Man 2. So it's like that. And stuff like that messes with the story, and DC movies know all about that with the companies getting involved, but it was just Dark World is definitely below it because I think Incredible Hulk is the worst, and then Dark World, but it's still it is definitely more enjoyable, and I can watch it over Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, I really think, with all movies, but especially with Marvel movies and superhero movies, I feel that sequels are really hard to make better than the original. The only ones I can think of when it comes to sequels that were better than the original is Batman Dark Knight, Spider-Man Far From Home, and that's pretty much about it. And Captain America Winter Soldier.
You're missing a few.
I mean, yeah, but I'm just saying for how I feel.
Well, Spider-Man 2, the original Spider-Man.
Okay,
2.
well, yeah, Spider-Man 2. And for a lot of people, X-Men 2.
Yeah, well, X2 is regarded as the stronger of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Just because of the story and how everything transpires. I want to discuss the X-Men trilogy later on, the original trilogy, but
yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's hard. It's just because people, or directors and producers often, and writers, often tend to just try to copy the original. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's why most sequels fail. It's not hard to make a good sequel. I mean, there's a lot of movies out there that shows, especially with Marvel movies like Captain America: Winter Soldier, and with Far From Home. Even a lot of people are kind of undecisive on that, or decisive, not undecisive, indecisive on that because a lot of people prefer Homecoming more. I don't know where I really fall. I've only watched Homecoming a handful of times, and I've watched Far From Home during its theatrical release, so I can't really say much. But I mean, I enjoyed both of them.
Yeah.
But I just have to disagree with you on that, just because it's not hard to make a good movie.
I mean, that's fine.
Especially a good sequel. It's just people are lazy, and they just, especially with Iron Man 2, they just copied or tried to copy.
If it's not hard to make a good movie, then please go tell the people at DC how to make a good movie.
That's just Warner Brothers.
They can't.
That's
seem
just
to
Warner
do
Brothers.
it.
Zack Snyder would have had a great Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, especially Man of Steel sequel, and a Justice League had the studio not try to get involved and not try to overtake everything. Especially at the end when Snyder had to leave and they put in Joss Whedon and ruined everything.
I just love that when it comes to comic books, I enjoy DC more than Marvel, but when it comes to the movies, it's like I can't even sit down and really enjoy a DC movie anymore. Aquaman was probably the latest one that I kind of enjoyed.
I really enjoyed Aquaman.
I think it was good, but
Jason Momoa made Aquaman better.
Yeah.
Definitely. He went from a lame, mocked superhero to a jacked superhero that everyone gets behind.
Yeah.
And now Green Lantern's the laughingstock, especially with Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern.
Yeah.
It's funny because a lot of people are trying to get Ryan Reynolds to cameo in the Snyder cut of Justice League as Green Lantern. No, please no. Please no.
Could you imagine if just Deadpool disappeared and they're like, hey?
I wish, but, or if he did cameo, if he would just kind of fourth wall break and start talking about a red suit and just kind of like side-eye to camera, that'd be funny, but that would not, Zack Snyder would not do that.
Could you imagine if it was
Warner Brothers would not allow that.
Could you imagine if like Ryan Reynolds was Green Lantern and they looked at the camera and apparently like the Ryan Reynolds face for Green Lantern was actually just a mask for Deadpool and he just puts it right back down? That'd be pretty funny.
You'd wish.
That'd be really funny.
They wouldn't do it. But back on topic with Thor.
Yeah.
The film, even with its downs, its numerous downs, it's still important plot-wise. And a few reasons for that is it does establish technically the third Infinity Stone, the Reality Stone, which is the Ether. It shows how Loki is very deceptive and tricks Thor and tricks everybody by faking his death again and trying to take over the throne. Odin disappears. He makes Odin disappear and is on the throne. The one thing that irks me about this film, they waited so long to continue the Thor trilogy and the Thor movies from 2013 to 2017. That's what, a 4-year gap between Thor: The Dark World and Thor: Ragnarok? So that's I don't know exactly the timeline for VMCU because it's not exactly 4 years. I don't think it might be a little bit, but from that point up to Ragnarok, that means Asgard was ruled by Loki, and it's not shown. It's not mentioned in Age of Ultron when Thor leaves. He just leaves. He uses the Bifrost and leaves. But at the end of Thor of the Dark World, he leaves Asgard and goes back to Midgard, back to Earth, to be with Jane Foster. And then that ultimately goes nowhere because of Natalie Portman's issues with Marvel Studios over a female-directed movie that didn't come to fruition. And she's real big into women's rights in films and female directors. And so she opted out of anything post MCU, except for Endgame and the upcoming Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
But it also established, a good thing that established is Thor's loss, because his mother does die. That's the first thing that happens to Thor that really messes him up. You know, originally Loki dying in the original Thor, but then he didn't die, messed him up. And so he loses his mother. He thinks he loses his brother. And just by the time Ragnarok and Infinity War and Endgame happens, he's just a destroyed man after all of his loss, which we will get to in probably part 4 of the MCU episodes. But it's good character development, and it leads into Guardians the next year because they introduce the Collector, who they bring the ether to. And speaking of ether, me and you both have a big problem with that.
Yeah.
When it comes to Natalie Portman as well.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit.
And when I say Natalie Portman, no disrespect to Natalie Portman. She's a great actress. She's been in a lot of great films. It's just when it comes to her character, Jane Foster, being too... Like, the story is just centered on her for most of it because she gets the ether inside of her. It's weird. And they even bring that up. Oh. Really? But anyway, when that gets, brought into it, she's kind of forced into the story, and it makes it centered on her more than Thor. And, Thor is supposed to be the main character of this whole thing, and it's just going in the other direction, which apparently Love and Thunder is going to. And no disrespect to Natalie Portman. It's just, for this film, it didn't work. Especially when it tried to take itself too serious. It was darker than the first Thor film. It's darker than Ragnarok, even though the story's not dark. And it's just, it doesn't work.
Besides the comedy in this movie, nothing works
very,
in this movie.
Small, subtle comedy.
Yeah. Nothing really works in this movie.
And you'd think someone like having people like Zachary Levi in it, who had a small role as one of the... it was Lady Sif in the Warriors 3. He was one of the Warriors 3. He was replacing another actor that left after the first Thor film because of scheduling conflicts, and then gets killed off in Ragnarok. Mm. And of course, Zachary Levi plays Shazam.
Yeah.
Well, now. But someone like that who's in a comedic superhero movie didn't get a lot of screen time, and so all the comedy is kind of limited.
Yeah.
Especially to the Captain America Loki scene.
Yeah. Pretty much my last thoughts on Thor: The Dark World really is this is probably the second worst movie in the MCU.
Yeah.
Second or third at least. But, you win some, you lose some when it comes to filmmaking with anything. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our number 5, Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Oh God, Age of Ultron. Joss Whedon's second attempt at an Avengers movie. The first one did very well. The second one, not so much. He introduced a lot of good things. He introduced Quicksilver, which didn't last long. Scarlet Witch. Introduced Vision. Ultron was, the actor portraying Ultron did very well. It made him an interesting character, but just not the character design, which we'll get onto a little later. But and introducing Andy Serkis in it, being Julius Claw, which Andy Serkis is a great actor. He's been in everything from Lord of the Rings as Gollum to being the motion capture actor for films like King Kong and Rise of the Planet of the Apes in that trilogy, and then being Supreme Leader Snoke in the Star Wars 2, technically all 3 of the sequel trilogy films. And he's just a great actor, kind of misused in the MCU a little bit, only in 2 films, small role in Age of Ultron, and then a larger role in Black Panther, but ultimately gets killed off. Spoiler if you haven't watched that film in the last 2 years that it's been out. But even though it introduced a lot of good, it had a lot of bad.
Yeah.
What are some of the bad things that you took from Age of Ultron? You can name a few.
We'll start off with the Hulk Black Widow love story, I guess.
The forced Hulk Black Widow story?
Yeah, it's like, who's the next character Black Widow is going to fall in love with, I guess.
They made Black Widow really flirtatious in the first few films, which, I mean, even her character in the comics was kind of flirtatious, especially in the Ultimates comics. She was really flirtatious with Tony Stark, being a villain, being undercover. I think she was a Soviet spy, which is true to her comic, but in that comic, the Ultimate Comics, Soviet spy gets all close to Tony Stark and then betrays him and then dies. I think she might have faked her death, but she dies trying to get information and leaks it all to the world. So, I mean, it's not, out of her realm as a character to be flirtatious, but it kind of made her... And Mark Ruffalo got in trouble for saying this. I remember he faced a little backlash. I don't know if it was him and Chris Evans. I know that Mark Ruffalo springs to mind. It was an interview with both of them. But he said a word that I'm not going to repeat. It wasn't horrible. It was bad, but...
I mean, it's bad. Don't...
Yeah, it's bad. I'm not downplaying it. It is bad. You don't want to say it, but he said that he faced a little backlash. But, I mean, when you think about it as the way her character was being written at the time, he's not wrong. Because they did make her very flirtatious with sort of Iron Man in the first film, but I was just trying to get him close because she was, working for S.H.I.E.L.D. And then in Avengers, I know she was a little close with Clint Barton, Hawkeye. And then it was revealed he had a family, and then close with Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and then close with Hulk. But, like I said, it's not out of the realm of her character, but it kind of, they made her look bad in a sense.
Yeah. I think the way they kind of used Ultron in this movie, especially, just the way nothing really happened in this movie with Ultron, really.
I agree somewhat. I mean, Ultron was used as a filler villain.
Yeah.
Not as big as he was in the comics. He didn't even have his comic creation. Because he wasn't created by Tony Stark in the comics, he was created by Hank Pym. So you didn't have that, first of all, because Ant-Man wasn't made until later that year. So they didn't have enough time to introduce Ant-Man and Hank Pym. But then you had Ultron's design, which was not good. I mean, it makes sense because they made him more human, more android-like, but compared to his comic counterpart, where it's a lifeless, soulless machine, which brings more menace to the character, they made him a little more comedic.
Yeah.
Which is not bad. I mean, it was, like, his comedy was well warranted because he was basically supposed to be a caricature of Tony. And that was very comedic because he made him. So it's not that bad.
I mean, I feel like the fact that they kind of he made him like a human bothers me.
It's not that bad that they humanized him because he was trying so hard to be human. That's the thing. They were trying to make him human. Like, he was trying to be human throughout the entire film, like trying to, get close to human as possible, but being superior and, destroying all life on Earth, killing all the humans, but the ones who lived would be spared. And that's why he creates Vision, or he tries to, and that's close enough to human as he could have gotten, But, I mean, he was just filler. Didn't have a large role at all. People are still hoping he'll come back. I'm still hoping he'll come back as a bigger and badder villain. New rock stars on YouTube, Eric Voss, his video breakdown of the detailed breakdown of Spider-Man: Homecoming when when Spider-Man goes into a truck that's filled with all these Avengers artifacts and stuff. There's an Ultron head. Like, it's Ultron's head. Not like the Ultron android, like the little bots he had run around that he used in his final scene that was more comic accurate. It was a full-fledged Ultron head, and his eyes were glowing. And a lot of people have speculated that meant that Ultron was still alive. Because when the Ultron bots and Ultron died, his eyes stopped glowing. It was, blank. He was not on, but they were glowing red. So hopefully he comes back. Probably won't. Kevin Feige, please.
Yeah.
Bring him back properly. Or one thing they could do with Ultron. Retcon Annihilus. Retcon Annihilus to be a higher form of Ultron. Like, merge Ultron with like a beta Annihilus to create the Annihilus from the comics. He looks like Ultron anyway. That's my whole thing with Annihilus. He looks like Ultron anyway, so go ahead and bring that in, and that could be the bigger villain for the next phase of the MCU if they haven't decided yet. Just have Avengers Annihilation be one of the films, and have that as a pinnacle of the MCU. But other than that, it had some good to it, didn't it?
I mean,
maybe not Ultron, but
I'd rather watch
this
movie 100 times more than Thor: The Dark World or Incredible Hulk. But I mean,
already have.
It's it's not my favorite.
Well, yeah, but
sorry for not being very verbal about it. I think it's definitely the worst out of the 4 Avengers.
Yeah,
it's not one of my favorites.
There's not much you can say about this film that we haven't already said.
Yeah,
it's hard to say good things about something that, compared to the other ones, is a dumpster fire.
I like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch.
For the most part, Quicksilver, they couldn't even call him Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch because of the deal with Fox. And then they killed off Quicksilver anyway because the year prior, X-Men Days of Future Past introduced Quicksilver.
Yeah.
A very much better Quicksilver. Something funny, Aaron Taylor Johnson previously played Kick-Ass from the film that was based on the
comic book
graphic novel.
Oh, the graphic novel, sorry.
They're the same thing.
Yeah.
Graphic novels and comics are the same thing, except graphic novels are more book-based, I guess.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to get corrected in the comments.
Confirmed Debit Podcast?
Probably. But, both of them were in it, except for, his name escapes me, the actor that portrayed Quicksilver in the X-Men series.
Yeah.
In the newer X-Men series. He was in it, I believe, for the first film, if I'm not mistaken. He's in the first film, but not in the second film. Because of, I think when he was filming X-Men, he couldn't make it. So they got a different actor. But both actors played the same character in 2 different universes. One of them got killed off, and the other one eventually had nothing to do with the movie at all. He was wasted. I'm looking at you, X-Men, Dark Phoenix. And Apocalypse. He was wasted in Apocalypse as well.
But one scene was kind of cool, where he was saving everyone.
In which... the mansion scene, yes.
Yeah, Apocalypse, sorry.
But in the final battle in Apocalypse, breaks his friggin' leg.
Yeah, that one's not my favorite.
And so he's useless through the whole film. And then Dark Phoenix... I haven't even watched the film, but I know it's bad.
Not that one yet, no.
But I know the scene in which he gets taken out by Jean Grey, and he's not seen throughout the entire film after that. Legit, he's not used because he gets into I don't know if it was a coma or not, but he gets horribly sidelined after that, and it sucks, man. And that's one of the reasons that I didn't watch that film.
Yeah. Age of Ultron, not our favorite.
One good thing it did, though.
Okay.
It did establish the fact that there were Infinity Stones. Because Thor, when he goes into a chamber and basically has a bath, a lightning bath, he does see visions of Vision. That's why he gets the name. But he also sees the Infinity Stones. He sees that the Tesseract is the Space Stone. He sees that I think he might see the Power Stone already in the orb from Guardians of the Galaxy. He sees the Ether, which turns out to be the Reality Stone, and he sees that Loki's scepter has the Mind Stone, which gets implanted into the Vision. So it's a good thing that they do establish Infinity Stones. And this is the first film in which they say Infinity Stones, because in the comics it was in the Infinity Gems. So they established that it's the Infinity Stones, they established that they exist in the universe, and then another good thing, Vision wields Thor's hammer. For a fact, that was a jaw-dropping moment in the theater. I know my jaw dropped, your jaw dropped.
Yep.
A few of my friends from high school's jaw dropped because we were talking about it the next school year. Because it happened in the summer. The film came out in the summer. And it was just a major, major moment. It was, one of the only good things about the film. But other than that.
Yeah. Moving on to our number 4. Iron Man 3. Let's just talk about it.
Probably one of our most watched films in the MCU.
I mean,
just because it was always on like FX.
Yeah. I mean, it gets a lot of hate, but
for good reasons.
It's better than Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
It's better than Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
It's
not saying much though. Come on, it's not saying much.
It's not my favorite, but I mean, it's got some good scenes. It's overall okay.
Some horrible scenes too.
It's overall okay.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
That's why it's
not
in
great.
the middle.
It's not good.
That's why
it's
it's
okay.
in the middle.
Yeah.
Speaking of it being bad, that's why I want to bring up the bad first.
Okay.
Let's not go with the obvious bad. Let's go
with the bad, the obvious bad, and the okay.
Well, no, let's go with the moderate bad. So what are some minor things in the film that are not as great? I guess some of the comedy is pretty dry.
Yeah.
Some, not all.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, some of the comedy, like you just said, was a little dry.
And some characters.
Would you consider the whole Mandarin thing moderately bad? Or
no, that's a major thing I want to get to.
Let's start with that, because I can't think. You
want to start with that?
I mean,
all right.
Okay, let me go ahead and start. Okay, something moderately bad. I hated that War Machine wasn't in it, but I'm also okay with Iron Patriot.
Yeah.
So I guess that's moderately bad, or whatever.
It was a weird choice to make him Iron Patriot, but for plot, I guess it kind of worked.
Yeah. I guess that's what you consider moderately bad. I didn't like how they started off with 1999 playing Blue.
Yeah, the turn of the century, even 1999 New Year's party.
Yeah.
Yeah, but something good about that, it did set up a timeline because the man that was with Tony Stark in the cave in the first Iron Man did say that he met him at a party a few years back, and it turned out to be this party because he did kind of meet him but brushed him off, which was Tony Stark at the time. He was a young billionaire. He just inherited, I don't know if he just inherited, but he inherited his whole company from his family a few years prior.
Thought you were gonna say right then. I was like, they've been dead for 9 years. 94? I thought it was 91.
It was 91, yeah.
Yeah.
December 16, 1991.
So it's been like 9 years.
It was 8 years at that point.
Okay, yeah, 8 years at that point.
Because it was 91 to 99, so it was about 8 years.
Yeah, okay, so, years. Whatever, but, I mean...
Yeah, he inherited the company, he was still ambitious, he was still a partier. God, that means he was a partier for a while.
Yeah.
Good God, because I don't... How old was he when his parents died?
Someone put it in there. Was he about to go to college?
I think he was about to go to, like, some kind of summer... Not like a summer camp, but like a summer thing. I don't know if he might have been about to go to college. He was young, at least in his early 20s.
I would like to think that the Tony Stark we see in the movies isn't based on his actual age, since he's like in his 50s now. Robert Downey Jr.
Maybe not.
I'd like to think he's a little younger as the character.
He's got to be at least in his 30s or 40s.
Well, okay,
hold
up. What year? We might not know, and if someone in the comments can put it, that'd be great. What year was in Endgame when they go back to the 70s?
Yeah, they go back to the 70s.
What, do you remember what part of the 1970?
I feel like it was the mid-70s.
Okay, because that's when he was born, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometime in the 70s.
Somewhere around the 70s. I mean, by the time the Endgame happens, he has to be at least 50.
Yeah, I mean, so
So he's
but
in his 50s.
Okay, so then that would mean he'd be late 20s and late 90s, maybe around there. Yeah, he'd be in his 20s.
Probably mid-20s.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, I can't think of a direct age because we don't know in Endgame. I don't remember.
I'm sure that
it has it on there. I just can't think of it.
I'm sure there's some Marvel Wikipedia out there that has the birth date, and I'm pretty sure it's shown somewhere.
I can't think
Tony
of
Stark's
it.
birth date, but
anyway, he was still young. I mean, definitely past his early 20s. So I mean,
yeah, at least in his mid-20s by 1999.
I mean, he was Tony Stark. He could party.
Yeah, but
anyway, going back to Iron Man 3.
But yeah, I mean that party scene, but it did set up the villain, which the villain wasn't good at all.
Yeah.
Okay,
let's go to Mandarin now.
Yeah,
let's go to Mandarin now.
So, in the original comics, the Mandarin is an Iron Man villain of Asian origin. I believe mainly Chinese origin. The Mandarin is also a Shang-Chi villain. He's going to be hopefully, properly shown in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And in this film, he's not shown as any Asian influence. Well, it's Asian influence, but the character himself is portrayed as a terrorist. An English-speaking terrorist. Like, almost like a perfect English accent. Well, it's not an English accent. It's more of almost like an American accent. But turns out to be fake. It's all a ruse. The character that is playing the Mandarin, Trevor Slattery, who is portrayed by Ben Kingsley, a well-known British actor. I know he was in Ender Game, I think. I think that might have been what it's called. And it was a fake, and it turned out that he was just, like I said, he was just an actor. He was a fake, and the real Mandarin was Aldrich Killian. Or so he said. He claimed to be the Mandarin. It was all a fake, and it just did not do the character justice. And it was kind of hinted that the Mandarin would return, which he is, but it was hinted that he would return in a following Marvel one-shot called Marvel One-Shot All Hail the King. In it, there was a Ten Rings operative. He was masquerading and disguising himself as a reporter, and during the report or the interview that he was doing, he starts questioning about the Mandarin, if he knew anything about who the Mandarin was, kills the guards, reveals that the real Mandarin wants to take his name back because he stole his name, and which has led a few people to theorize, especially, once again, new rock stars on Instagram, or not, on Instagram, yes, but on YouTube.
Yeah.
They do mention, Eric Voss does mention in his latest video talking about it, that a potential opening scene could be Trevor Slattery's death. The Mandarin taking back his name and killing the fake Mandarin. So that could be an up. Just like clean slate. Get rid of the old Mandarin, have the real Mandarin, since the other person, Aldrich Killian, who said that he was the Mandarin, is also dead. It would just be a clean slate. And then, was there any other ups? Oh, I know one. And then I'll let you continue. Sorry. An up is showing Iron Man's progression. In the film, he's shown as not being... Like, throughout the film, he's reliant on the suits, because this is directly following the Avengers. He has PTSD over the Battle of New York, being in the wormhole, being in space, shooting the nuke off.
He's got a lot of PTSD from the Battle of New York.
Yeah, and it's shown heavily in the film, which is something that's tasteful in a way, because it shows how self-reliant he is on his suits. He's so reliant on the suits that he keeps making them. He goes from having, what was it, Mark 6 in the Avengers,
I believe.
From Mark 6 being the final suit shown in Avengers to Mark 42, the Prodigal Son, being the name. He goes from 6 to 42 in a matter of maybe not even a year. He's making all of these suits because he wants to protect the world. He wants to protect the people closest to him. being Pepper, being the human race, just anybody close to him. And the PTSD doesn't help because every time he feels like he needs to be creating more suits so that he can, be there.
That's applauding for making 36 suits in a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe not even a year. Yeah. I don't know the direct timeline. It might still be 2012 by the time that Iron Man 3 happens. Might be 2013. But that would pit Iron Man 3 after Thor: The Dark World, because Iron Man 3 happens around Christmas. But just, the self-reliance on the suit and then stepping away from the suits, being just Tony, being the genius, the gadget genius that he is, not being reliant on the suit up until the end where he destroys all the suits, says he stopped being Iron Man up until Avengers Age of Ultron where he puts the suit back on.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that was a good thing, story-wise. And if it was, translated as well, that's a different story. But story-wise, it's good to see him not as reliant on the suit and all of his suits. Sorry. But continue what you were saying before I rudely interrupted you.
I literally don't remember.
Well, I thought you had something.
Iron Man 3's okay. There we go. That's it. That's all we need to know. Moving on.
Well, on that note, yeah, like you said,
moving on. Number three. The surprising 2015's The Ant-Man.
There's not a lot of bad things to say about Ant-Man. From opening to finish, it was a good, surprising film.
Yeah.
One of the many films we watched in the summer of 2015. It opens with, I think it was in the 90s. I think it was 1990. Maybe a little bit before. It was before Tony's parents got killed. Hank Pym was working for S.H.I.E.L.D. He's been working for S.H.I.E.L.D. almost probably 30 years because it was shown in Endgame. He was already working with Pym particles back in the 70s. And that was also discussed later on in the film because it talked about Hank and his wife being operatives as Ant-Man and the Wasp, the original Ant-Man and the Wasp, through probably the 60s and the 70s up until her disappearance and her supposed death, but in the quantum realm. But then, he leaves in the opening scene. He thinks that they're stealing from him, so he leaves and goes into basically exile with his own company, which he later relinquishes his shares in and his complete ownage of. But then the film mostly focuses on Paul Rudd's character.
Yeah.
Scott Lang. Paul Rudd is an amazing actor, and he does not age at all. Being a man in his 50s, as old as Robert Downey Jr., he does not look it, especially in this film. He looks 30 in this film, at least.
Mm-hmm. He looks super young.
Youthful. And in the movie, he does a very good job at portraying an ex-con just trying so hard to be the father that his daughter needs. And ultimately going back to crime, but it pays off in the end because he eventually gets the Ant-Man suit, which is good. A lot of good in this film. It's not a lot of bad to talk about, especially with the comedy. This is a good mix of comedy in a superhero film with enough seriousness, and not a film attempting to be serious but adding some comedy. Thor: Dark World. But it was a good balance of comedy and seriousness that the sequel doesn't show as much. It's more comedic, or it tries to be more comedic than the original, forced comedy almost, but this one has a good blend. And it continues the Phase 2 tradition of Kevin Feige's obsession with The Empire Strikes Back, where a character loses their hand in every single film.
Yeah.
Or at least it's represented.
At least a hand. Sometimes it's an arm.
I mean, it was shown Iron Man 3, Aldrich Killian loses his hand. Thor loses his hand in a trick by Loki against Malekith, the main villain. Let's see, who else? Julius Claw loses his hand to Ultron after comparing him to Stark. This film...
Yellow Jacket?
Yellow Jacket, yeah, that's his name, Yellow Jacket. Yellow Jacket loses his arm when he's being shrunk. Guardians both Groot and Nebula lose an arm. Groot loses two.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Winter Soldier,
Bucky
loses an arm because it
gone.
shows a flashback of his arm being gone because he fell off the cliff and lost his arm. So, yeah, it just kind of continues a tradition that's a weird obsession with Kevin Feige for some reason.
Yeah.
It's just paying homage to Empire.
Yeah.
But it's just weird that it's in every single film.
Yeah. This one's it keeps the trend of being better than its sequel.
Yeah. But I mean, even the sequel's not horrible.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
It's just like Guardians. It's not horrible.
Yeah. I
prefer the original, but...
I prefer this one over than the Ant-Man and the Wasp. But I mean, Ant-Man and the Wasp is still pretty good, though.
Yeah, for what it's worth.
I just feel
it's
that...
more of a filler.
Well, I think it's just the fact that it was the one right after...
Endgame.
Infinity War. That's kind of hard to,
But like I said, it was just a
continue
filler
off of.
because it was supposed to fill in the plot with the quantum realm and time travel and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't... Even though it was the first outing of the Wasp, probably wasn't done as well as you'd hope, But nevertheless, it was still a decent film.
Yeah. And Ant-Man, the original, is very good.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I love the film.
I want you to think about this before we go to our number 2 and our number 1. He would have never became Ant-Man. He would have never went back to crime. None of it. If Baskin Robbins would not have found out.
Oh, Jesus.
Think about that. None of this would have happened if he could just continue working at Baskin Robbins.
Baskin Robbins always finds out.
Always finds out. Go ahead and moving on to... we had differences on our number 2 and our number 1.
Yeah, I mean, and it's minor differences. But we'll go ahead and talk about your number 2.
Yeah.
Which is my number 1.
Yeah. Captain America Winter Soldier.
I mean, from a film standpoint, it's a better film to me. Now, your number 1, my number 2 is a great film for story, but this one is just like an overall better film because no disrespect to James Gunn because James Gunn does an amazing job.
Yeah.
But the Russo brothers, their first outing at a Marvel movie, the first Captain America movie they did, the first of 4 films in the MCU that they've done, the most out of any director or directors because there's 2 of them. But I mean, the film is just to me overall better. You got the plot with the Winter Soldier being Bucky and trying to stop him because he's an assassin that's been he is cryogenically frozen time after time to be used by different people over and over. It's a good story, and it introduces Falcon, which is an up. It establishes more of Captain America and Bucky's history because Cap is totally thrown off from Bucky being the Winter Soldier. He thought he was dead for 70 years because he was frozen on ice. Last thing he knew is his friend fell to his supposed death. He couldn't even get drunk with his metabolism. He couldn't drink his sorrows away from his friend who he thought died and now being used by Hydra and the Soviet Union before him. And that hints at Black Widow's past with him somehow. I don't know if it'll ever be mentioned.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't the only film that Black Widow mentioned a history with Bucky as the Winter Soldier. Because both of them being used by Russia, Black Widow being in the, I think it was the Red Room, the Black Widow program, which is going to be shown a little bit more in depth in her own solo movie. But I don't know if Black Widow the film is going to show anything about Bucky, because it's still not said what happened between them. All you know is that she's got a scar from Bucky because he shot at her but didn't kill her. And then in Civil War, when they're having a melee, when Bucky's been brainwashed, she says something on the lines of, don't you remember me or something. So who knows? Bucky could have been involved in Budapest with Hawkeye and Black Widow. He could have been targeted, or she could have been targeted by the Winter Soldier to be eliminated by the Red Room. You never know. And by Hydra. so she wouldn't join Shield. You never know. That would be interesting. That would be a good tease, or not tease, but like a plot twist. And then you don't know who Taskmaster is. But I mean, this film set up a lot when it comes to the future of the MCU, because Civil War, continued off of this plot. Cap's looking for Bucky, so that he can reunite with his friend, but also make sure he's safe because he doesn't know what's going on because he's been brainwashed for so long. And then I know that you have a few problems. It's like one problem with it mostly.
What, me?
That you bring up all the time.
It's just the camera work, man.
Well, it's supposed to be more of an action film camera.
I understand. It's the only thing that causes it to be my number 2. It's great. It's a great movie. It was originally my number 1.
And he says this because the camera is shaky. It shakes a lot.
That's just my opinion.
I know. I'm just bringing it up to the people. I'm just bringing it light to the people so they know what we're talking about.
I know, but everyone has their opinion. People are probably disagreeing with our list, and that's fine.
Well, that's fine. Everybody got their own opinion.
I felt that it had
that's
to
your
be
own opinion, man.
Yeah, and I feel like it has to be my number 2 because I don't watch it as frequently as my number 1.
So I've watched your number 1 often.
Yeah,
like Ant-Man and like Iron Man 3. It was just a film that we've watched so many times because it was always on TV. You know?
and even if I'm on Netflix or if I'm on a streaming site, whatever, if someone says, I want to watch my first Marvel movie from the MCU, pick one. I'm gonna start them off with my number 1, and I'm not gonna say, here, let's go to Winter Soldier, because I feel that people are gonna go, who's Bucky? I feel that.
Oh, you're different than me.
I feel that Guardians of the Galaxy is just one of those movies that you can start someone on.
I don't know. It has no... Besides Thanos being at the end, or not in the end, the middle, because certain things, your number 1, Guardians, is... It's hard to say to start them off with because besides, like I said, the Power Stone and Thanos and the Collector, it really doesn't have any ties to the overall MCU.
Which is why I feel like it's a good starter for some people. If they don't want to start with Iron Man,
I would start them from the beginning.
But what if someone says, I don't want something that's super serious. I want something that's a little comedic, got a little bit of action, it's got a little bit of everything. Yes, Iron Man has it, but I don't know. Guardians just seems like one of those movies that's like, if you like newer movies, have some action, some comedy, some sadness, some happiness, then you can throw them with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, but I'm also the type of person that just feels like if you're going to start somebody off on a big journey like this, you got to start them off with the first. It's almost the same thing, unfortunately, that I did with Jurassic Park with an ex of mine. It's the same thing I would do if you had, somebody starting on Star Wars. That's what I would start them off with. I'll start off with the first of everything. Well, Star Wars maybe not episode 1, but definitely the first, episode 4. Like the beginning of everything. I would start them off with the beginning of everything. Not like the chronological order of films, like the MCU where it would start off with Captain America, and not like Star Wars where it would start off with Phantom Menace. And not even the X-Men, the overall X-Men film universe. I wouldn't start with First Class. I would start with X-Men, the original 2000 X-Men.
My whole thing with starting someone off, and after we discussed this, let's talk solely on just my number 1, your number 2, which is we already know Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
But I feel that when you're starting someone off with a Marvel movie, especially MCU, why should it be Guardians of the Galaxy for me?
Well,
because you can say, oh, you like Guardians of the Galaxy? They already watched it, they loved it. Let's hit Guardians of the Galaxy 2. It's a good one. It's not as good as the first one, but it's pretty good. If you start someone off with the original, which is Iron Man, it's like, oh, you thought that was good? Well, let me show you Incredible Hulk. Or if you want to skip that one, we'll watch Iron Man 2, and then we'll watch Thor. Like, you get what I'm saying? It's a very...
I understand what you're saying.
It's like, oh, they did good with the original, and now all the other ones suck.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to, a film universe, you can't just skip over things like that. Yeah, if you just want to like maybe not introduce
You just
people
want
to
to have
the
a good
universe,
time and say, hey, you want to watch a Marvel
that's
movie?
different. That's different than introducing them to the universe. That's just having a good time watching a good film. That's different. It'd be the same thing with, I don't know.
I'm not going to put someone through the pain of watching Iron Man, having a great time, and then making them watch Incredible Hulk. I'm not going to put that.
Well,
I'm not going to put someone through that.
But that's different. We're coming from two different places. If you want to start somebody off, just start them watching a film. Just say any Marvel film, any MCU film, I'll say. You want to start with any MCU film. Yeah, you can start off, with Guardians because it's, a more happy-go-lucky film. And then after that, Guardians 2 or maybe even Ant-Man. That's different. What I'm saying is starting them off on a cinematic journey, like through the entire cinematic universe of Marvel. You got to start with the first one. You can't just start in the middle. It's the same thing like if you want to watch the Star Wars movies, you start with Last Jedi, just out of random order. So you start with Last Jedi, then you go to Attack of the Clones. You don't, and I know I named off 2 bad movies, but just in general, like even if you start off with Force Awakens.
Are you gonna say let's start off with Phantom Menace though?
No, but what I'm saying is, if you start off in the middle of everything, if you like legitimately want to get involved with watching a cinematic universe like Star Wars or like the MCU, you don't want to start in the middle. Not necessarily the worst films. You just don't want to start in the middle to try to get involved because you're not going to know the plot.
But Guardians one of those movies where it has no tie-in besides the stones.
That's what I'm saying is, and what you're saying is, if you just want to watch a Marvel film, if you just want to have a happy time, you watch that. But what I'm getting at, and I'm hoping you're understanding.
I understand everything you're saying, but I also disagree with everything you're saying.
But how am I wrong, though? You don't want to start a cinematic journey. Same thing with, well, it's different for the Dark Knight trilogy. But Indiana Jones. You don't want to watch, if you want to watch all of them, you don't want to start with the Temple of Doom. Or Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Because you don't know what's led up to that point.
But nothing has led up to Guardians.
Let me finish.
You could start off with Guardians and just start with Iron Man after that.
Oh, you're aggravating.
It doesn't matter.
That's what I'm saying, though. It's different when you want to watch something fun. If you don't want to start like the universe. Anything that when you try to start watching something in a series, it's the same thing with watching the sequel before the original. You don't want to watch the sequel before the original because you don't know what's happened up until that point. And yes, really the Guardians, besides a few things, are by themselves. You still, if you want to get the full feel of the MCU, interconnecting every single thing, especially with the stones and with Thanos, you got to start from the beginning. That's what I'm getting at. Just watching, just randomly, if you don't really care, if you just want to watch a movie because you never watched it, that's different. Like watching Guardians first, because you haven't watched it before, you want to watch it again, and not really caring about the other films. You just like that film. Like I have a coworker that doesn't really care for like the Marvel movies, but likes Guardians. Guardians was enjoyable to her. That's different. You know what I mean? Like just picking up a few Marvel films here and there is different, but when it comes to wanting to get an interest into it, you got to start from the beginning, or at least a chronological beginning, like Captain America. Even though that's not the best film probably to start off with, but it's something that introduces you. This is this is Marvel. This is the MCU. This is the character in it. It's also bad to start off with that because that's your first introduction to Nick Fury instead of Iron Man.
Oh, you like Captain America? Well, guess what? Here's Captain Marvel.
Let's not.
That's the second one you would have to watch.
Let's not.
So, I think the only way to do, unless you're really just, I just want to get into Marvel. Well, just pick a movie. Like really,
you know what I mean.
I know. I'm just saying. I don't know. We went on tangents.
That was a necessary tangent because you were pissing me off. I'm trying to explain this, and then you're just aggravating me.
My number 1, and your number 2.
And it's not because I hate the film. I really love this film. It's just from, like I said, Winter Soldier to me is better cinematically than Guardians. Guardians has a wonderful story. I love the Guardians story.
Guardians of the Galaxy. It's great.
Well, yeah, I mean, like we said, a lot of good things came out of this film. It has the first appearance of Josh Brolin as Thanos in the MCU. Before that, it was portrayed by a stand-in. No lines were given at the end of the Avengers. It was just shown that it was Thanos, like a side view of Thanos. But this film, it introduces him and introduces what his goals are. He wants to collect the stones. And the first one he's trying to collect is the Power Stone, which eventually he does before Infinity War. It's shown off screen, but he decimates Xandar and takes the stone. You know, in this film, it's shown that he does try to get the Power Stone. He tries to use Ronan the Accuser, a former Kree, to obtain this stone. And you don't know his exact plot yet, because it does differ from comics to movies. But you don't know his exact, plot for using the stones. You just know that he wants to get them. And he wants the stones. And it does interconnect, like I said, the stones with the orb being revealed to be the Power Stone. And also something that does introduce is the Celestials, which are a major part of the MCU, especially in later installments. Because you have Ego, which is Star-Lord's father in the film. He's a Celestial. You also have the Eternals, which are going to focus on Celestials and the beginnings of the MCU, basically, because they're in the name Eternals. They've been around for a long time. They know about the Celestials. They probably know about the stones, and witnessed the stones being created. Maybe they had some involvement with the stones. You never know. But it introduces a lot of future plots and story for the film. And I know that it does introduce in the post-credits scene one of your favorite scenes and favorite characters.
Howard the Duck.
Seth Green portraying Howard the Duck in a small cameo. And another thing, it connects Thor the Dark World with Guardians, because it does show the Collector once again. A larger role than Dark World, but still kind of small. Not a cameo, but still kind of small. And another good thing that came out of Guardians is that it established a lot of actors as big Hollywood actors. One in particular is Chris Pratt.
Yeah,
Chris Pratt has already had, a TV and film career prior to Guardians. He was in Parks and Recreation. He was in a bunch of other projects. But this is the first film that really established him as a major Hollywood actor, I would say. Because, before this, I didn't know who Chris Pratt was. I was, young. I was 14. I didn't know who Chris Pratt was. I didn't watch Park and Rec. But seeing this opened the door for a lot of fan support and a lot of fans of Chris Pratt, more so than he had before. And then it also opened doors for him in Hollywood, because after this, he had roles in the Lego Movie, in Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence, I believe, and in the global box office phenomenon Jurassic World, the fourth film in the Jurassic Park franchise. And and it's led to him being in more films down the line. He's in the Guardians sequels. He is in Infinity War and Endgame, big blockbuster movies. He's in the Jurassic Park sequels, the most recent one, Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom, and then he's going to be in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and Jurassic World Dominion. And he's been in a lot of other films here and there, but it's really opened the door for him. And not to mention Drax being portrayed by Dave Bautista, former WWE superstar. You can catch more about him on possibly a later episode on our other wrestling podcast, the Ellie Do Wrestling Podcast. We will plug that at the end, but I just wanted to plug it right here.
Go ahead.
He's been in a lot of films now. He was a Bond, at least a minor Bond villain, and I believe it was Skyfall. He has been in other films such as, I think it was called My Spy, is the most recent one.
Something like that. And
he was also in Stuber with a fellow MCU actor. His name escapes me. I know that somebody's probably going to comment in the comment section to help me out. Confirm Epic Podcast maybe. But he's going to be in Eternal.
Mm-hmm.
He's just had an overall successful career in film so far. He's very comedic when he needs to be, but also very serious. Michael Rooker of Walking Dead fame. I know he was Daryl's brother in The Walking Dead. He's a big star in Hollywood for the last few years. Then you have Bradley Cooper as the voice of Rocket Raccoon. I think he needs no more introduction because like a majority of people fangirl, especially over Bradley Cooper. Vin Diesel plays Groot. Probably took him like 2 hours to film all of his lines. And they had like Karen Gillan, who before VMCU was known for Doctor Who most prominently. I know she portrayed a major character in the first a couple seasons of Doctor Who, and then went on to be a co-star in the Jumanji sequels with the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and then Gamora being portrayed by Zoe Saldana, who's already a major player in films such as Avatar, Not the Last Airbender, The Aliens, and its sequels coming up, and in Star Trek. So she is part of major film series. And then you got James Gunn, of course.
Yeah.
Who is an amazing director. And some of the things that you really enjoyed about this film.
I think that it was a good way to introduce a group of characters that, unless you read the comics,
yeah,
you really didn't know about.
We didn't know.
I didn't really know about them at all. I think it was a great introduction. The sequel was great. We'll get to that in Phase 3 episode.
Yeah.
I think that we really can't do wrong with these characters now that everyone knows them, and this was just a great introduction to start off with. And
do wrong with the characters. You can kind of do wrong with the characters.
I don't think they've done wrong with them yet. So unless Volume 3 decides to just do something crazy,
I beg to differ a little bit just because of Infinity War. Infinity War did portray Star-Lord as a dick throughout most of the movie. And not even him, everybody blaming Star-Lord for ruining the plan to get the gauntlet off of Thanos. That's not what I'm talking about. Overall, he just seems like a dick in the film. And Guardians 2 did portray him a little bit as a dick, and he has dickish tendencies throughout the films, but not like Infinity War. Infinity War, he just seemed like an awful dude because the way that he was portrayed is just not favorable.
Well,
because he was a lovable dick in the first film. In the second one, he kind of got more egotistical because he was with, no pun intended, his father Ego, so he was godlike. So he started being like more so of not a bad person, but like egotistical or a dick. But then he was just more of a dick in Infinity War, like it's just the fact that he went from being a somewhat rude. He was a rude guy because that was supposed to be his character. He was egotistical. He was rude, but then he was just unlikable in Infinity War. And it's just the writing. I didn't appreciate that because of it's not really a story arc,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think under James Gunn,
under James Gunn it's different. And
you can't go wrong with the Guardians with James Gunn.
That depends on how he decides to finish the third film.
I think he'll do great.
I have no doubt that he'll do great. I'm just, it's just from a story standpoint, I don't know how well it's going to be. Because in Endgame, he wasn't, even though he wasn't used as much, and he did rightfully get kicked in the Family Jewels, in the Infinity Stones, he was, it was rightful for what he did in Infinity War, but it's just, it didn't really set up much besides going to look for Gamora.
Yeah.
So plot-wise, I don't know if it was right to have him act like he did in Infinity War, even though in Guardians 2 it kind of showed that. Still, the film is great.
Yeah.
And it sets up a lot for future films, especially if you want to continue going into space for MCU films, because even though Thor kind of introduced that, Guardians really set the tone for a space film in the MCU.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot you can do for a space film. You have, if you want to introduce Fantastic Four did venture into space for a little bit.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do a Secret Invasion, some of that could be taken in space. We already know that Nick Fury is in space, falling far from home. You could do a Nova film. You've already introduced the Nova Corps, so just introduce Nova.
Yeah.
And then, if you wanted to do Secret Wars, that takes place in space. You can do that, and that's how that's an easy way to introduce Venom into the MCU.
Yeah.
More so than this Sony convergence with Marvel and Spider-Man being able to swap universe, whatever the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
They went back and forth saying that, Venom is in the MCU. Venom's not in the MCU. What are you talking about? Venom's not in the MCU. We're cutting ties with the MCU. Oh, Spider-Man's back in the MCU. It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. We'll have to see how it goes with the shared Spider-Man universe, and if they continue to have Spider-Man in the films.
Yeah.
But it allows for future films to use whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. We're going to go ahead. We should start wrapping up the episode. We went for a little bit, got off topic a couple times, ranted a couple times.
Necessary rants.
I think we're just going to end it off like this. I'm going to give you one of the titles in Phase 2. Just give me one word, how you feel about it, okay? Thor: The Dark World.
Wasted potential.
I said one word, but okay, one phrase. Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Iron Man 3.
Decent.
Age of Ultron.
I'm going to go again, wasted potential.
Ant-Man.
Great.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Great.
Captain America: Winter Soldier.
Excellent.
Alrighty.
Did you miss any?
I think I got them all.
Okay, good. Well, that'll do it for episode 2 of the LA Do podcast. And that'll conclude this episode. Next episode, we are doing part 1 of the MCU Phase 3, where we will do at least 6 films out of the entire Phase 3. It's about 11 films total. We want to cut it down, make it as long as these first 2 episodes. So, look forward to having the part 1 of Phase 3 within the next week. And I'm Dalton.
And I'm Clinton.
And this was the LA Do podcast.
See ya.
Peace.